Hi everyone. During the previous sections for this chapter, we looked at the weaknesses of the League of Nations and the policy of appeasement, both of which were factors which led to the outbreak of World War II in Europe. Now we're going to look at the other side, which is Hitler's expansionist policy. Now before we start, just bear in mind that a lot of the events which we covered over here and over here are basically the same events which we look at over here, just that from a different perspective. Here we're looking at the actions which the League of Nations and Britain and France tried to take or didn't take in order to stop German aggression, Hitler's aggression. Here we're going to look at Hitler's aggression itself. Okay, so we're looking now from the perspective of Germany as opposed to from the perspective of the League of Nations as well as Britain and France. Alright, now don't get alarmed. When it comes to Hitler's expansionist policy, you will see that there are a grand total of 9 reasons, or rather 9 events of Hitler's expansionist policy. Okay, but anyway, they all are pretty straightforward. We'll look at them one by one, and again, a lot of these are repeated from what you learned in the previous section. Let's start off with number 1. Okay, October 1933. Hitler came to power in January 33 and he gradually consolidated his power. By October 33, he was pretty much firmly in charge of Germany, and one of the first steps he took was to withdraw Germany from the World Disarmament Conference, which we learned about earlier, as well as the League of Nations. So, what were Hitler's actions themselves? He had demanded that France disarm to the same level that Germany had to under the Treaty of Versailles. In other words, France had to cut down their weapons to a large extent. Alright, if you recall, during the Treaty of Versailles, Germany had to disarm greatly, and now Germany demanded that France also disarm greatly. Basically, something which Germany was not happy with when they had to do so under the Treaty of Versailles, and so you can definitely predict that France would not have been happy with Germany suggesting that France do the same. So you can predict France's response. They said they wouldn't, or they would have said no if they were to speak in French, right? And basically, Hitler then used this as an excuse to withdraw Germany from both the World Disarmament Conference and the League of Nations as a whole. Basically, Hitler said, well, if you are not going to listen to me, fine, I'm not going to care. Okay, to hell with the League of Nations, to hell with the World Disarmament Conference. You're not showing me face, I'm just going to leave. Okay, and that's basically what Hitler did. What's the effect of this? It's a negative effect, at least in terms of Germany becoming more, because Germany now became more aggressive. They no longer had to obey the League of Nations. Previously, since they were members of the League of Nations and they were part of the Disarmament Conference, they had to abide by the rules of the League of Nations. But now that they were gone, that was it. It wasn't the case anymore. This meant, it led to, again, this bomb signifies that it's more likely for war to take place, because the Germany was now free to ignore the terms of the Treaty of Versailles, which meant that it could reintroduce conscription and rearmament, right? Under the Treaty of Versailles, if you recall, Germany was banned from having conscription, which means like national service, compulsory national service, and Germany also had to disarm. So now that Germany had left the League of Nations, they could ignore whatever the Treaty of Versailles said, and they could reintroduce these two, which we're going to get at right now. Second reason then, 1935. Okay, even though we say 1935, it's not exactly starting in 1935, and we'll get to that in a bit. But before that, let's look at this red light here. This red light represents that it's actually not allowed. Okay, the Treaty of Versailles, which again we've talked about several times. Hitler and Germany in general were not happy with the Treaty of Versailles, and this for several reasons. One of them was that they weren't happy that Germany was very weak, right? Made militarily very weak due to the Treaty of Versailles. And under the Treaty of Versailles, conscription, rearmament were not allowed. Alright, if you recall, Germany's army size was supposed to be restricted to just 100,000 troops. At the same time, of course, there was conscription, which was banned, and so on and so forth, a lot of other military restrictions. What did Hitler do? at this point in time. Take note, this is important, he secretly had started building up the German Air Force and the army from 1933. Secretly, why? Because he didn't want to make it public. If he made it public, he may have had the League of Nations or Britain and France try to stop him, right? And so he did so secretly. He only made it public 2 years later. Okay, so for 2 years he was building up his army and the Air Force. And you can see, within 2 years, his Air Force, or in German it's called the Luftwaffe, it had 2,500 planes. Bear in mind that under the Treaty of Versailles, Germany was not even allowed to have an Air Force, and now within 2 years, it had increased from 0 to 2,500, so it's a big deal what Hitler was able to do. In terms of the army, Germany was supposed to be restricted to 100,000 troops as part of the Treaty of Versailles, but by 1935, Hitler had managed to triple this to 300,000 troops. Okay, so you see Hitler did a lot of stuff within these 2 years, where he secretly was rearming Germany. 1935, conscription was also reintroduced, and by doing so, okay, he planned to increase the size of the army all the way to 550,000 people. Alright, and again you can see this would make war more likely, because as the army is bigger, it's more likely that Hitler would want to go to war. Even though he said all of this though, he did publicly state that he was committed to peace. Do you believe him or not? Okay, I trust you don't, and you will see that later on he kept on making more promises which turned out all to be empty. Anyway, what was the effect of this? The League of Nations took no action against Germany. Okay, this is a common theme you'll see. Germany does something, or aggressive nations do something, League of Nations barely does anything in response. The reasons for which this was the case you've learned about earlier. Britain and France also took no action. Why? Because they were unwilling to risk another war, and we've looked at the reasons of this in more detail when we looked at the policy of appeasement, right? As a result, this is bad because Germany became more ready for war, right? As Germany prepares and does more things to build itself up militarily, there's no response, and so Germany becomes more ready for war because there's no one who's willing to stop Germany. Okay, so that's conscription and rearmament. The following year, after conscription and rearmament were made public, Hitler did something called the Remilitarization of the Rhineland. Now, Rhineland should be a place which is familiar to you. You would have learned about it in chapter 1 as well. It was basically demilitarized, right? Under the Treaty of Versailles again, the Rhineland was not allowed to be remilitarized. Why? Because this would pose a military threat to France. Okay, if you recall, Rhineland is a piece of land in Germany which borders France, and so France wanted it demilitarized during the Treaty of Versailles to keep France safe from any possible German attack. Of course, Germany was not happy with this because they were saying that, well, that would make it easier for France to attack us. And so this was one reason why Germany was very eager to remilitarize the Rhineland, and so this is what Hitler managed to do. Okay, his actions, he sent German troops into the Rhineland, and what's the excuse? He said, well, we have to defend ourselves from France and the Soviet Union, the USSR, and so, well, we're going to remilitarize the Rhineland, like it or not. Okay, what was the effect of this? What was the response? Surprise, surprise, Britain and France took no action. We don't even talk about the League of Nations because we know it was quite useless by this point in time. As a result of this, Hitler became even more popular with the German people and the military, and this is bad, at least in terms of leading up to war, because Hitler made Hitler even bolder in his demands, because Hitler was actually taking a gamble here, right? He knew that by doing this, he ran the risk of having Britain, France, or some of the other Western powers try to stop him and even use military force. So he took a gamble because he never knew if they may actually use force to stop him. But in the end, his gamble paid off because they took no action. And since he managed to get away with this, he took even bigger gambles later on, which we'll learn about over there. Okay? The next step. Okay, you see he's gradually getting more and more ambitious, starting off by withdrawing from the conference and League of Nations to taking some actions to build up the military, and then moving the military to take control of land which it was previously forbidden from taking within Germany itself. Now, number 4, the Germans actually got involved in fighting. okay, which is another step up, a bigger step. What actions did Hitler take? He sent troops, equipment and warplanes to support the nationalist forces, that means the anti-communist forces in the Spanish Civil War. Okay, we talked a bit about that earlier, so I won't elaborate so much. What was the excuse which he used? We are fighting against communism. If you recall, during this time, the Nazis hated communism, but so did Britain and France. And so Hitler said, well, you see, I'm just doing you a favor. I'm fighting against the communists because we don't want the communists to come to power in Spain in the Civil War, because basically the Spanish Civil War was a war between the communist side and the anti-communist side. So Germany was using its troops to support the anti-communist side. Now, were they really fighting against communism? Was that their main aim? Actually, Hitler also wanted to give his troops some practice, practice in fighting, because he knew that later on they would be involved in even more fighting. So this is to give them a bit of a head start, right? Some training, some real practice in fighting. Anyway, what was the effect of this? Okay, once again, no action taken by League of Nations, Britain or France. Hitler now looks at this, he sees League of Nations, Britain and France to be weak, and well, you can't blame him for that, right? Britain and France, League of Nations, were supposed to take action. Again, they failed to do so. Hitler then becomes more confident. So again, you see this is a running theme. No action taken by people who are supposed to stop Germany, and therefore Hitler doesn't look at them very favorably, and he becomes even more confident, becomes even more bold. And we'll see this happening again and again until it was too late. Next step, March 38, Anschluss with Austria. Now, again, something which was not allowed under the Treaty of Versailles, because by doing so, Anschluss would mean Germany joins with Austria, of course. This would make Germany more powerful, and of course, France, especially Britain as well, did not want Germany to become too powerful, because it would pose a threat to them. What actions exactly did Hitler take? Okay, we talked a bit about this before. He basically caused trouble. He encouraged the Nazis in Austria to cause trouble in Austria, pressurized the Austrian Chancellor, the Austrian leader, to agree to Anschluss. There actually was supposed to be a vote held to decide if the people of Austria supported Anschluss. But we can see Hitler actually sent troops into Austria before the vote. Excuse he gave was that he's trying to help keep order, prevent things from getting too lawless and there being too much violence. And eventually, the Austrian Chancellor realized that, well, this was too sticky of a situation, too stressful of a situation. He knew that something bad may come out of it, and he basically eventually resigned under German pressure. The vote was then abandoned, and guess what? Austria became a province of Germany. Okay, so again, Hitler got his way. What was the effect of this? Well, again, Britain and France didn't do anything. This brought the world closer to war, because now Germany could take advantage of Austrian resources, their military forces and their weapons. So now Germany becomes even more powerful, and if they're more powerful, they'll be more willing to go to war. Okay, Hitler now, because of his success, he won even more support, especially among the military, but the people in general. And bad, because Hitler grew even more confident to commit more acts of aggression once again. Okay, so now Hitler becomes more confident. He's already got his troops involved in fighting, and now he's taken over a piece of land which did not actually belong to him. So he's becoming even more bolder, even more aggressive. The next step, he took even more land through something called the Munich Agreement, which is the main event of appeasement, which we learned about earlier. What actions did Hitler take? Threatened to go to war if Germany was not given control of Sudetenland, which of course is a piece of land in a neighboring country of Czechoslovakia, which belonged to Czechoslovakia, but it had a large majority of German-speaking people, and so Hitler said, I want this piece of land for these German-speaking people to join me in Germany. Britain and France, basically, following the policy of appeasement, which we talked about earlier, they gave in to Hitler's demands. In other words, Sudetenland was given to Germany without the consent or the consultation of even Czechoslovakia itself, as well as the USSR. Why is this a big deal? Czechoslovakia was the country which owned the Sudetenland, and basically Britain and France gave away a piece of land which Czechoslovakia owned without even asking Czechoslovakia. If you may ask, why didn't Czechoslovakia do anything about it? Well, it may have had some military force, but on its own it was too weak to do anything to stop Hitler. Okay? Hitler now, again, promised to be a good boy, promised not to invade any more territories. Okay, and I hope now you're thinking, yeah, right, because exactly, he did not fulfill his promises, he did not obey his promises, he did not keep his promises. Alright, what's the effect of this? Germany gained control of Sudetenland, importantly without even having to fight. So you see, Hitler managed to get so much of what he wanted, and Sudetenland is a big piece of land. He got this without even having to fight at all. He never had to fight for the Sudetenland. And, of course, contrary to his promise, he now secretly began to plan to take over the rest of Czechoslovakia. Now, Sudetenland was the German-speaking part of Czechoslovakia. The rest of Czechoslovakia was not German-speaking, so Hitler still wanted it. He was not happy with what he had. And so, another 6 months later, number 7, he invaded Czechoslovakia. Actions: invaded the rest of Czechoslovakia, like what we said there. Okay, going against his own promise made at the Munich Agreement, right? But of course, this may have been not a surprise to us, but it was a surprise to Britain and France, who thought that appeasement had worked. If you recall, we talked earlier about how the British thought they had achieved peace for their time, that through appeasement the world would be at peace. But just 6 months later, look what Hitler did, and they were caught unawares. They were really shocked about it. Okay, only now, after so many things, did Britain and France finally realize that Hitler could not be trusted. Alright, a bit too late, or rather very much too late. And even if this was the case, they still did not take any military action against Germany. They were saying, okay, next time. Okay, Hitler's next target was Poland, and Britain and France said, okay, Czechoslovakia is the last straw. Now, if you were to invade Poland, which is the next of Hitler's targets, finally Britain and France said they would declare war. Okay, but you see how long it took. We're at event number 7. No concrete action had been taken even from step number 1. And now we reached the stage where Hitler already had gained so much in confidence, he had gained so much in military strength. Alright, so really, whatever Britain and France did, we could say really was too little too late at this stage. Now, before Hitler took his next aggressive step, he did sign the Nazi-Soviet Pact with Stalin, the Soviets. Okay, what's the background to this? Stalin, okay, which is of course from the USSR, who's from the USSR, he had wanted to form an alliance with who? With Britain and France against Germany. Now, if you recall, communism, which is the USSR's ideology, was enemies of the Western powers' ideology, which is democracy, also enemies with Germany's ideology of Nazism. So Stalin wanted to work together with Britain and France to deal with the Nazis. Okay, this was what Stalin wanted. However, Britain and France were more suspicious of communism and the USSR than they were of Germany and Nazism. What does this mean? This meant that they would not be willing to cooperate with Stalin because they trusted Stalin less than they trusted Hitler. Alright? So what actions did Hitler take to take advantage of this? Stalin basically was rejected because Stalin wanted to ally with Britain and France, but they rejected him. So Stalin felt a bit angry, right? And so Hitler took advantage of this. He signed a pact of non-aggression in the USSR. So again, initially he was an enemy of Stalin, but he met with Stalin. Okay, they signed a pact of non-aggression, meaning that they agreed not to be aggressive to one another, to each other, not to go to war with each other. Why is this significant? Okay, because this gave Germany the opportunity to invade Poland. What were the terms of this pact of non-aggression? USSR promised to remain neutral. That means they would not take sides if Germany attacked Poland. And secretly, these two countries, Germany and USSR, agreed to divide Poland between themselves. So both would benefit because Germany would be able to attack Poland without having to fear USSR trying to stop it. And in return, USSR would be able to get some of Poland for itself. Okay? Effect of this. Britain and France were shocked. once again, they were not expecting Stalin and Hitler to come to any agreement because they were such enemies. Okay, but they did come to an agreement, and as a result, bad, because Hitler now had confidence to invade Poland. Let's look at this a bit further. Why did he have this confidence? Because he knew that he would not have to end up fighting a war on two fronts if he were to invade Poland, which means that, okay, if he were to invade Poland, he knew that Britain and France would try to stop him on one side, but he was worried initially that USSR would try to stop him on the other side. But now that he had signed this pact of non-aggression, he didn't have to worry about the USSR attacking Germany if Germany invaded Poland. Instead, they only had to worry about an attack from Britain and France. So that means no more war on two fronts. It only would be a war on one front at most. Okay? Again, like what it says here, Eastern Front would have been against the USSR, Western Front would have been against Britain and France. But now that this pact of non-aggression was signed, the Eastern Front would no longer be a factor, and Hitler would be able to concentrate on fighting against Britain and France. Okay? At the same time, he was more confident because he believed that Britain and France would not help Poland if he were to invade it. Why? Because they would not have USSR support. Since USSR was now firmly against them, USSR had signed a pact of non-aggression with Germany. Okay? So this is bad because Hitler now was willing to go even further in his expansion to attack Poland. Okay, and this is what happened shortly after the signing of the Nazi-Soviet Pact in September 1939. Hitler's actions, invaded Poland. Why did he do so? Okay, he was confident that Germany would be able to handle any possible counterattack from Britain and France, because you see, Germany had strengthened itself so much over these past few years. He felt Britain and France were not strong enough to stop him, and if Britain and France tried to stop him, Germany would be strong enough to handle it. Okay? Effect of this: Britain and France told Hitler to withdraw from Poland, right? They said, finally, Britain and France were willing to take some action. They said, okay, you better stop your attack on Poland, or else we would declare war on you, declare war on Hitler. Hitler by now was very emboldened, he was very confident, he knew that he was in a position of strength, so he refused to withdraw, and so Britain and France declared war on Germany. Alright, this was the official start of World War II. So just like that, alright, through all these actions on Germany's part, okay, as Germany was not stopped due to British and French League of Nations inaction, Hitler became more and more confident until he invaded Poland. The invasion of Poland was the event which finally started World War II, because when Hitler invaded Poland, Britain and France declared war on Germany. Alright, so that's about it. I think it's a lot of stuff, but remember, this is just looking at it from the perspective of Germany. So a lot of this, the content is a repeat of what you saw earlier, just that from a different perspective. Alright, thank you very much. See ya.